Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending our active transportation program, the 2025 active transportation program workshop for cycle 7. And so first, I just want to thank Madera County Transportation Commission for hosting us today. We're in a really nice room and they have a well-stocked refrigerator and lots of snacks for us. So we're very, very happy to be here. And so what we would like to start with is, Alika, do you want to go over participating, or should we do introductions first?
I can quickly go over participating and then we can roll into intros after.
Okay, so Alika, my name's Lori Waters and I'm with the California Transportation Commission, and also here today is Beverly Newman Burkhart and Alika Changizi. And we do have a special guest. The boss is in the room. Teresa's here. So after Alika goes over how to participate today, then we will do introductions in the room. And so take it away, Alika.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So the CTC exists to make transportation planning, funding, and policy more understandable and accountable. Our workshops can take place in diverse locations around the state so that commissioners and staff can hear directly from our stakeholders throughout California. We now offer a hybrid and fully virtual workshops to allow our stakeholders to participate more fully no matter where you are. This workshop's agenda is located on our website at www.catc.ca.gov, as well as the Active Transportation Program website. Live closed captioning is available on this webinar. Please select the Show Captions tab at the bottom of your screen. There are a number of language options available there to choose from. Any document that the CTC creates can be translated into any language you need. Simply email us at ctc@catc.ca.gov and we will have them returned to you as quickly as possible. For all of our workshops, we encourage interaction with our stakeholders. There will be an opportunity for questions and comments throughout this entire workshop. For those attending via Zoom, you should see the webinar control panel located at the bottom of your screen. There you will find the raised hand, Q&A, and chat tabs. We encourage you to use the raised hand feature as soon as we reach an item to give the system time to acknowledge you. Commission staff will let you know when it's your turn to make your comment. Once you've been unmuted, please make sure to state your name and the agency that you are representing. Alternately, you may choose the Q&A tab or the chat tab to submit your comment or question. Commission staff will read those on your behalf. As a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link or phone number to access this webinar. These should not be shared with other participants, as this can create confusion for staff when making comments. Please do your best to be concise, and please make sure that your comments add new information. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, just to repeat, for those attending in person in this room, if you have any questions or comments throughout this workshop, please come to the podium so that the speakers here can capture you and people online can hear you clearly as well. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Alika. So let's do some quick introductions in the room. Just say who you are and who you're representing. And like Alika said, the speakers are up here. So just make sure you speak loud enough that the people online can hear you. And for the people participating online, if you are having trouble hearing in any way, just send us a message and we'll make sure everyone knows to speak up. So why don't we start?
Yeah, Troy McNeil, Madera County Transportation Commission.
Thank you, Troy.
Colleen Vidnoff, I'm with Caltrans Local Assistance D6, the ATP coordinator.
Okay. Good.
Blake Dunford with Stancock.
Mara Toomey, Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments.
Carl Anderson, Metropolitan Transportation Commission.
Jackie Mata, Santa Barbara County Association of Governments.
And Paul Saldana, City of McFarland.
Teresa Favila, the California Transportation Commission.
Nicole Say, the City of Madera.
Jonathan Carvalho, City of Madera.
Eric Conti, City of Madera.
Meg Prince, Merced County Association of Governments.
Jeff Finley, Madera County Transportation Commission.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for coming in person. It's always nice to have actual people to talk to at these workshops. So as everybody probably knows by now, we like to start our ATP workshops with an inspirational active transportation story. So we're going to do something a little bit different today. Beverly, sitting right here, she's been with the program for a couple cycles now, and she's increasingly taking on more and more responsibilities. So you all probably know Beverly, but how much do you really know about Beverly? So we are going to do a little get to know Beverly for our inspirational active transportation story. And, you know, she is really truly lives active transportation. So I thought it was really, really important for you to know more about her. So Beverly.
Thanks, Lori. I don't know how inspirational this is going to be, but it does have an active transportation theme, I promise. Okay, so everyone at the CTC, like all of my coworkers, probably view me as the crazy bike lady. On our staff meetings on Monday, Lori will be like, so what did everyone do this weekend? And I'm sure they're all tired of hearing me say, I went on a bike ride. I rode bike with friends. I rode my bike with friends. I rode my bike with my husband. I rode my bike. Like that's, oh yeah, I rode my bike to the pub. Like literally it's just, all they ever hear about is my bike or my bikes. There are many of them. And then, you know, bike month is basically another holiday for me, a month-long holiday. And so I'll be like, you guys, bike month is coming. And they're like, it's still October, calm down. I'm like, okay, well, we still have to prepare. So anyway, I am the crazy bike lady at the CTC, but it hasn't always been that way. So I wanted to tell you guys kind of just about bikes in my life and active transportation in my life. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I grew up in rural Placer County near Colfax. So Colfax is a little gold rush town up 80. If you ever go up to Tahoe to ski, it's like the last little town you can stop in to get supplies before you get into the high Sierras. I didn't actually grow up in Colfax, so not in a town. I grew up in the middle of nowhere near Colfax. My parents decided that, you know, like that town was just, there were too many people. They needed to move further away from all those people. But Colfax was the closest town to us. And so I was a really outdoorsy and sporty kid. I love nature. As you can see in this photo from our backyard, I even hugged trees because I love nature so much. So yeah, I rode my bike everywhere around our property. We had about 3 acres, but I was basically banned from going on the streets or in the roads at all because the main roads were pretty dangerous. There weren't any shoulders. The cars moved pretty fast. So I was pretty much like stuck on our property riding my bike. I had friends who lived nearby, but I wasn't allowed to like walk to their houses because the roads were too dangerous. When I was 8, I decided to walk to one of my friend's houses. She lived about a mile away. My parents ended up calling the police and reporting me as missing, and there was a helicopter involved. So it's probably like the only time in my childhood that I got in trouble. I was a pretty like nerdy, non-troublemaking kid. Yeah, so active transportation wasn't really a thing that like, it wasn't even really a concept to me. Like modes of transportation in my mind were school bus or car. And then in high school, one of my teachers, my English teacher, Mr. Mackey, would commute by bicycle from Nevada City to Colfax and then home every day, which is about 15 miles each way, so a 30-mile round trip. And like my mind was blown by this. Like I thought about it a lot. Like I was like, how is he doing this? Like he's getting to school at like at least 7 a.m. Like is he waking up at like 3 a.m. to do this? Like in my mind, like that time to get to Colfax from Nevada City was just like insane. And I was like, how is this man doing this every day? I was just like amazed by it. Okay, so that was basically my childhood. Like active transportation just wasn't really a thing for me because it wasn't really possible where I lived. And we were really dependent on cars. Okay, next slide. Okay, So I wanted this presentation to be really authentic. So this is a photo I took with my camera phone in like, I don't know, 2009 or something. It's a really grainy photo, so great quality. So college comes, and this is the story for another time, but I ended up going to college and grad school in Scotland. This is Edinburgh. And it was the first time in my life that I lived somewhere with an amazing transit system, just like buses that would take you anywhere you wanted to go. And to be completely honest, I basically completely ignored the transit system because for the first time in my life, I could walk anywhere I wanted to go. I had like the complete freedom to walk anywhere I wanted to go. And so I walked everywhere in some pretty terrible ballet flats, which were really popular at the time. Really messed up my feet. So I walked to class, obviously. I walked to soccer practice, which was about 1.5 miles away from my apartment. I had a part-time job that I went to about 3 times a week, and that was 2.5 miles away from my apartment. Walk there and back every time. There were buses that would take me like basically door to door to all of these things, but I wanted to walk because I just like really enjoyed it, and I just loved being like outdoors and just seeing everything. So the whole time where I'm like walking all these places, I was like, wow, I should really get a bike. But I was a country girl and the traffic scared me to death. And I was like, there's no way I could ride a bike here. So I was in that like, for all the active transportation people, interested but concerned kind of phase of my bike adventure. Yeah, so I was really interested and I would have saved a lot of time, but I just didn't think I could do it. So in 2012, I moved back home, and I basically met my now husband immediately, and he was a big cyclist, and like it was really important to him. He's like, one of the first questions he ever asked me, we were still friends, he's like, you can ride a bike, right? Because he just really loved riding bikes. And I was like, yeah, I can ride a bike. He's like, oh yeah, like we should go bike riding. And I was like, okay, sure. And then a couple months after we started dating, I got invited on the family bike ride. And I was like, I don't have like an adult bike to ride. And he's like, that's okay, you can borrow one of my mom's bikes. I was like, your mom has more than one bike? Like, what's going on? So I showed up to this family bike ride. You can go to the next slide. And his whole extended family is there, and they're all dressed like this. And I'm like, what is going on? Is this like a team or is this like a cult? Like, what is happening? So his family they're just like all about bikes. They like riding bikes everywhere. I think they love being together. It's like a huge extended family. They love like hanging out together. And I think like maybe a long time ago, one of them got a bike and they were like, oh, we all have to get bikes now. And so they're just like the bike family. Like they lived in, like my husband's parents lived in Fair Oaks, and there are bike lanes in Fair Oaks that I'm pretty sure were put there because all of these people rode there every day. And like the Fair Oaks was getting like counts of like how many cyclists there were. They're like, wow, there's a lot of cyclists here. We need to put bike lanes here. And it was just them. Like seriously, I was like, this has to be like a cult or something. It totally was. And they like converted me to their cult immediately. Basically, I went on my first bike ride with these crazy people who are now my in-laws. And I basically started descending into bicycle madness after that. Like just the first time riding a bike with them, it was like that pure joy that you feel when you're a kid when you ride a bike. Like that whole feeling came back to me, and I just like, I don't know, just fell in love with it again. So I had entered my enthusiastic, but maybe not so confident phase. It took a lot of time for me to get confident, to be honest. A lot of like reassurance from my husband, a lot of, just going out and facing my fears. It took me a long time. And I started just like riding my bike pretty much everywhere. I started commuting to work, basically finding any excuse to ride my bike. So any excuse I could find to be on a bike because it made me so happy. And I also just started getting more involved in like the local bike advocacy scene. Started getting more vocal at like city council meetings. I was appointed to the traffic safety committee in my city as the bicycle and pedestrian rep. Oh, wait, I have a picture. Oh yeah, you can go to that one.
Okay.
Okay, so that's my little placard from when I was appointed, and that was like the first time I'd ever had a name placard in my life. I was like so proud of it. Obviously, I took a picture of it. And my name was a lot shorter then, so all of the letters could fit on it. So that was nice. So yeah, just started getting more involved. So yeah, I guess today, I mean, it's taken a long time, but I am definitely in the strong and fearless category now. I am seriously just happiest when I'm on my bike. If there's an excuse to ride my bike, I'll do it. Grocery shopping, bike. Post office, bike. Go to the outlet malls to get some new clothes for the commission meeting, bike. Meeting up with friends on a Friday evening, bike. And then 2 years ago, my husband and I decided to sell one of our cars because it was basically gathering dust in the garage because we both ride our bikes so much everywhere. So now we're a 1-car household, and we basically try to do all of our short trips like around town by bike. The only thing that's really changed since we sold that car is that we're no longer paying for registration insurance for a car that we weren't using anyway. Yeah, so I guess it took me a long time to kind of get to the strong and fearless phase, but I definitely remembered what it was like to be interested, but concerned or like enthusiastic and getting a little bit more confident. And that's kind of why I love this job so much. I get to kind of spread what I love the most around the state. And like hopefully help some of those interested and concerned peoples find facilities that will like help them find that joy, like that joy that you have when you're a kid riding a bike, like help them find that again. So that's basically my story. I do want to show you some proof that I do ride bikes and I can ride a bike. So one thing I didn't mention at the beginning is that I'm pretty camera shy. I don't really take a lot of pictures of myself. Like throughout my whole life, like my mom really wasn't allowed to take pictures of me as a kid either. So it's like hard to find pictures for this. So outside of using bikes for transportation, I also race bikes. I race road, mountain bike, and my favorite is cyclocross. And the fortunate and unfortunate thing about racing is that there's always professional photographers there to take pictures of you. So I have plenty of those to share. And so you can go to the next slide, Alika. So I picked some flattering ones from races to show you that I actually can, in fact, ride a bike. That's it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
All the credit to the photographers for making me look cool. So I really am not cool.
So thank you, Beverly. And that, I did think that was very inspirational. And just so you know, we decided yesterday afternoon that she was going to be the subject of our inspirational story. So she put this together last night, I'm assuming. So
This
thank
morning.
you. Thank you. Thank you for doing that last minute. And our next workshop is actually on Halloween. So we're going to try to come up with a Halloween themed inspirational story or scary story. So, okay. Now I think we're going back to you, right, Beverly? We're going to kind of go back and forth on presenting
you're right.
different parts of the presentation.
All right, so this is kind of our agenda for today. Not on here is we'll go through the schedule again. And Alika is going to talk about engagement again, just as some reminders. And then we'll recap some of the topics from the September 28th workshop. And then hopefully talk about some new topics. So we'll be discussing Justice 40 today, hopefully discussing which years of data you should use as for DAC qualifiers. And then we also have some policy clarifications that we're hoping to get to if time allows. And then Alika will recap our action items at the end. Okay, so just as a reminder, these are some basics about the 2025 program. There will be 4 years of funding from fiscal years 25-26 to 28-29. We anticipate that we'll have about $555.5 million in funding. Sorry, I always have to say this. This is written in thousands. We should really write it in millions. It's just like a habit of state workers to write it like this. So it is in millions, so 555 million. So for fiscal years 25, 26, and 26, 27, we'll have about $100 million for each fiscal year. And then for the second two sets, the later two fiscal years, we'll have about $177 million for each fiscal year. Next slide, please. All right, and then I'm done and I'll hand it over to Alika.
Okay, great, thank you. Oh. Okay, so I'm gonna quickly go over the central workshop schedule. So we held our 2 kickoff workshops earlier this year. And then we held a workshop on September 28th. And then we also have the workshop held today. We had previously scheduled a workshop for last week, but ultimately we decided to cancel that, given that we have plenty of other workshops to bring up additional topics. So our next workshop will be scheduled for Tuesday, October 31st, and we will continue discussing the guidelines. The following workshop will be on Wednesday, November 8th to wrap up the draft guidelines, and we'll bring any items that the Equity Advisory Committee has proposed. And then following that, we will discuss the Quick Build program at the November 16th workshop. And we will finalize the draft guidelines following that workshop. Tuesday, December 5th, we are anticipating this will be held in Riverside. And this workshop will be focused on the project study report equivalency, and this will be hosted by Caltrans headquarters staff. January 10th of 2024, we will hold a workshop to discuss the applications, and February 6th of next year to discuss the scoring rubrics. And just to do a quick recap, so we are continuing to offer virtual site visits. Our availabilities currently are Tuesday afternoons and Thursday all day. And we opened up registration in October, and that will continue through March of 2024. And that will be approximately mid-March, because once we adopt the guidelines at the March CTC meeting, we will no longer be able to provide these technical assistance efforts. The link here that's posted is to register for a virtual site visit. This link is also posted on the Commission's Active Transportation Program website, and that's located under the Cycle 7 tab. I'll pause here for a minute to see if there are any questions on engagement before I continue. Okay, not seeing any questions. This is the final 2025 ATP schedule. Okay, so at the January 2024 Commission meeting, we will present the draft ATP guidelines and the draft ATP estimate. At the March 2024 Commission meeting, we will have a hearing and adoption of the ATP guidelines, and we will also adopt the ATP fund estimate. And following that, the call for projects will go out. We will post the scoring rubrics on our website by March 29th of next year. And let's see, so the large MPOs will submit their optional guidelines to the Commission by May 10th of next year. And the project application deadline is June 17th of 2024. At the June 2024 Commission meeting, we will either approve or reject MPO guidelines. And then by November 1st of next year, we will bring our staff recommendations for the statewide small urban and rural components and the quick build projects. And we will adopt the statewide small urban and rural components along with the quick build projects at the December 2024 commission meeting. So any projects that were not programmed in those components will be distributed to the large MPOs based on their location in December. And by February 21st of 2025, that is the deadline for the MPO draft project programming recommendations to the commission. And the deadline for the MPO's final project programming recommendations to the commission is April 22nd of 2025. We will have those MPO component recommendations posted on our website by June 2nd, and we will adopt them at the June 2025 commission meeting. So I will pause here to see if there are any other questions.
So Alika, someone asked on the chat if we're posting the PowerPoint.
Oh, thank you. That's a good question. Yes. So all of the workshop materials, including this PowerPoint and the recording, will all be posted on the Commission's Active Transportation website, and it will be located under the Cycle 7 tab. Is there an application due date set for the statewide component? Yes. So the application deadline for the statewide component and for the small urban and rural is the June 17th, 2024. That's located on the schedule here. I went back a slide, so hopefully, Diego, that answers your question. Okay. Not seeing any other questions.
Okay. So, you know, if anybody has any questions or comments that you want to make, you know, we try to keep this as a conversation. So just put something in the chat or raise your hand or let us know here in the room if you'd like to speak. And so right now we're going to go back and do a recap from our last workshop on September 28th. And, you know, we've had some good discussions on various topics, but anything that's been proposed as major changes, we've had some good discussions, but there has not been a strong will to make any major changes this cycle. So that's the direction that we're going, is not making any big changes. And partly because that's the will of the stakeholders, and because it just makes it easier for applicants if you've applied in past cycles. When you apply again, you're not having to do anything majorly different. You know, you're just updating your application and improving it where it needs to be. Okay. Okay, so some of the things that came up last workshop was possibly changing the project size thresholds. And what this is just for the application. This says what application that you submit for an infrastructure project. And for a small projects, 3.5 million or less, then you do the small application, medium, over 3.5 million or up to 10 million, and then large over 10 million. That's all it means, really. And we updated these last cycle to take into consideration that project costs have gone up. So we talked a little bit last workshop about possibly changing these thresholds, but we decided it would be best to keep them the same for this cycle, because we'd like to have at least 2 cycles with the same thresholds. So, because it helps us to compare across cycles. So at this point, we are not recommending to change the project size thresholds at this time, but it would be good for us to revisit it in the next cycle. So are there any comments or questions on that before we move on?
We got one online from Yvonne Garcia stating BCAG supports no changes on project size thresholds.
Thank you, Yvonne.
don't see anything else online.
Anything in the room? Anybody have any opinions? So everyone seems okay with that then? Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, move on to next. Okay, and then we also talked about large project caps, and we talked about this in a number of different ways. And one of them was a stakeholder had suggested limiting the number of mega projects. And so we talked about that some and had a good discussion. And then so there, we could also consider a cap on the amount of ATP that you can request. So there's a couple ways that we could do a cap. And the reason for this is because as the projects get larger, which is great. I mean, these are great projects that are very transformative, but then the money does not spread around very far. So we end up funding fewer projects. So we talked about this a lot, and this is something that we've talked about with our the ATP Technical Advisory Committee. And at this point, we staff would not recommend any type of cap. And you know, because I don't think we need one, and it does tend to, any kind of a cap does tend to hurt the rural and less resourced agencies more because they don't have the other funding sources to bring in to build a larger project. Sometimes they're coming to the ATP for their all of their project funding. So it's a way that a less resourced agency can do a large active transportation project. So at this point, we are not going to propose any kind of cap in any way.
So we received two comments,
Okay.
one from Yvonne Garcia stating BCAG does not support caps. We've been strategizing for years to develop meaningful transformative projects for our region. And then we got a follow-up comment from Claire Globely from City of Santa Cruz stating that she agrees with Yvonne.
Okay, I'll give it a minute here, see if we have any comments before we move on. Anybody in the room? Yes.
Yes,
Kitty, come
please.
on. And remind us who you are and who you're with.
Yes, I'm Jonathan Gamajo with the City of Madera. I work for the engineering department as an assistant engineer. We applied for the cycle previously, and one of the problems we had, we were just a few points shy of meeting the cutoff, what we call it, the results for the projects. And one of the issues that we saw was talking about caps, it kind of reminded me of it. It's for smaller cities like us, we don't have as much local funds to do the local fund match to do get this higher scoring. You know, if we were able to put in a little bit more money, we could have gotten our project fund. So a potential problem with that is even if a local or smaller municipality does a large project with the no cap, if they can't provide the local funding, you might miss out a few points to even reach that. Because it was the cutoff for last cycle like 76 points or something like that. I can't remember exactly.
For the smaller but in rural component,
I believe so.
yeah, it was 78.
Okay, I think we were like 76 or 75. Just a potential concern for the smaller ones and getting that funding. And a problem that we had in the previous cycle.
Okay, thank you. That's actually a leverage topic. And so the ATP does not require match, but you can get points for providing leverage funds. So that's actually our next topic, but thank you. But the two are kind of related. Thank you.
And I'll just put it on the record again, Mara Toomey, Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments. Our region does not support caps, and we prefer to continue to have large projects because we believe it benefits the smaller and rural regions.
Thank you, Mara.
I'm not seeing anything else online regarding this.
Okay. Okay. And you know, if you think of something and you want us to go back, we can do that too, so, okay. Okay, leverage, which, thank you, you led us right into our next topic here. So, for leverage, like I said, you can get points for bringing in, your own funds. In the small, there, we don't get points for leverage, but we do in the medium and the large. And you can earn up to 5 points, for leverage in the medium and large, depending on how much that you are providing. And so there's kind of a couple of different topics here, but let's just go through them and then we can talk through them. Okay, and then we also discussed at the last workshop, adding in other kinds of funding that could be used for leverage. And right now, what we have is that funds allocated by the commission on a project-specific basis are not eligible for leverage points except STIP funds, which are eligible. And so at this point, we are not recommending any additional eligible leveraging sources at this time. We talked about this at the last meeting, and then we actually talked about it with our management, and this is where we ended up. So we can talk about it more if you want, but we would have to convince our management, which is not wanting us to add any other kinds of leveraging sources. So before I move on to the discussion, any comments on that? Anything, Alika?
Not pertaining to this topic, no.
Okay, well, if you think of anything, we can come back to it. But so the other thing that we started the discussion on is, should the leveraging points be reduced in the medium application? Which is the point that, your name's John? Jonathan, okay, which is what Jonathan was bringing up. So if you can't put in leverage, you're not gonna get those points. And I'll tell you, because the programming funds that we have for this cycle, the ATP, the scoring cutoff is gonna be high. It's gonna be really high, it just is. So those leverage points are gonna be really important. And we've talked about this pretty much every cycle. And we talk about if we should keep the points, reduce them, and we usually end up in the same spot. But I think we should talk about it again this cycle because of what Jonathan brought up, and that those leverage points are really, really going to be important this cycle. So I'll just open it up for discussion.
So we have one hand raised. Jonathan, go ahead.
Hi, yeah, different Jonathan, but saying essentially the same thing as Jonathan. That's with Safe Routes Partnership. And we've brought this up in a few cycles, I think, but especially now that we're at the point of considering, and I think appropriately declining to put any kind of cap on the large projects, we can at least, I think, mitigate the kind of growing trend of the largest projects swallowing up so much of the funding pot by making it a little bit easier, especially for undersourced communities, to compete in the medium infrastructure pot without leveraging sources. I'm thinking particularly of smaller urban and rural communities in that pot, as well as if we sort of decrease in the medium and maybe bump up a point or two in the large, then those larger projects won't take quite as much of a bite out of the overall pot if they're being incentivized to also put up some of their funds on their end. So that would be something that the partnership supports.
So Jonathan, you're supporting reducing the leverage points in the medium?
Correct.
Okay.
And correct.
Thank you, Jonathan. What else we got?
We have a general application question. I don't know if
Okay.
you want to take that now.
Let's do this discussion. We'll
Sure.
come back to that.
Okay, so Diana, we'll circle back to your question. We received one written comment from Yvonne Garcia stating BCAG supports leaving the program alone. The issue is the amount of total funding available. The state is pushing for mode shift funding available to reflect that effort.
Okay. So, yeah, we really need comments on this because for commission staff, I don't think we care all that much, so we need to know what the stakeholders want on this. So, yeah, so Carl?
Carl Anderson with Metropolitan Transportation Commission. I'll second Yvonne's comments, in the spirit of keeping things the same for applicants who have prepared or strategically thought about what their application is going to look like for the cycle 7. Also, I think it's also worth reminding folks for the discussion to remind them how many points are available in the medium application, how many go to leverage, and how much a potential reduction would be before we continue the discussion.
So right now in the medium, you can earn up to 5 points for leverage. And if you put in, what is it, over 20%, Beverly, then it's 5 points and then it goes down from there. So, and the possible point reduction would be what the stakeholders propose. So we could put it down to 3 points, 2 points, no points.
We received one comment from Sheila from TCAC stating, is there any way the percentage for the small urban and rural component to increase from 10 to maybe 20%? I know that would take away funds from other categories, but I believe it would help the small urban and rural applications.
So the answer to that is no, because that's in statute. So 10% goes to the smaller urban and rural by statute, unless Carl, you want to give up your MTC share to smaller and rural. Okay. So no, Sheila, unfortunately, no, we can't do that. It is in statute, the funding splits.
So Maura Toomey with AMBAG, and we support no changes to the leveraging. There's pluses and minuses to all this. There's benefits to large, there's benefits to small. I just think for another cycle, this just needs to stay. A lot of people have sort of been planning their projects based on this, and I think changes at this point would be counterproductive.
Got another comment from Yvonne stating, totally agree with Mara and Carl. We got a comment from Jerry Barton stating, I support no changes to the leveraging points.
So right now, we're mostly hearing no changes, so any people that want changes need to speak up, because the way we make these decisions is that we try to hear from everybody, and then we think about what seemed to be the overall will of the group, and that's how we move forward. So people that are wanting changes, please speak up, everybody, if you want to contribute to this discussion, please do.
We received an additional comment from Maria Carrillo stating it would be helpful for smaller cities to apply for medium projects without the leveraging funds allowing more competition.
Okay, so that was a suggestion for no, I think no leveraging points for the medium.
Correct.
Okay.
Joelle Campos from SJCOG stated SJCOG supports leveraging funds for large and medium projects. We also have a hand raised. Alchemy, go ahead.
Hi, Alchemy Graham with the California City Transportation Initiative. Just wanted to have on record that that Cacti's position would be in support of reducing the scoring weight for the optional local match.
Alchemy, so you said So reducing the points for leverage for medium or both, or can you say that again?
Yeah, so as Cacti, we represent the California's 8 largest cities and Department of Transportation's the Departments of Transportation and Public Works departments. So however, I do think that we would be in support of reducing the scoring weight for the medium application.
Okay, thank you, Alchemy.
Next, we have Martha. Go ahead.
I also in favor for the reduction of the medium scoring. I think that it's hard enough to be able to compete with some of the larger groups and to ask folks that are in medium to apply for larger, just so that they could have a better chance is not really equitable. So I think.
Thank you, Martha. Okay, Jonathan, go ahead.
Jonathan Gamaho, just a quick question. Could we have a little discussion about what your thought process is to why it's 5 points and the pros and cons of that, just to hear that?
So, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to totally remember, but I'm sure that we worked through the points with the technical advisory committee, and Mara's shaking her head because she's on the TAC. So yes, so we went through, we developed the applications and the scoring breakdown with our technical advisory committee probably a couple cycles ago when we split up the apps into the various pots like that, like the small, medium, and large. And then we brought it back to the stakeholders. So that would have been the process that we used.
No specifics you can share about why 5 was selected, but it was just an overall look at.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I can't think of, I don't know, Maura, do you remember any like specific reason that we had 5 other than it just?
I think we were trying to look at giving enough points where leverage meant something or there was an ability, but not so many points that it totally disadvantaged agencies that have limited ability to match. And it is it's kind of a balancing act.
Yeah, so we try to keep the score, the points available at 100, and then we just split them up with most of the points going to how does your project, what benefits does the project provide, and safety. That's where the bulk of the points are, and then for the other questions, it's just split out how something would work. Does that help or not?
Yeah, that does a little bit of information.
Okay.
Appreciate that. I think at this time, it's hard to speak for our city engineer, but I know for a fact that had the leveraging been a little bit lower in weight, our chances would have been better.
Okay.
But it's hard to give an official stance on
Yeah.
from the city.
And I will say now that you say that, you make a good point, and I'll kind of connect what you're saying, because when we did come up with those points, it was a couple cycles ago, and the scoring cutoff was not as high as it's gotten now. So there is a bit of a difference now from when we first came up with those scoring. That 2 points, but the difference between the having 3 points or 5 points, those 2 points are going to make a difference. So, and yeah, so thank you. Maura, did you?
Oh, I was just gonna say, one of the things the TAC really looked at is sort of that balance and how we split the points. And, again, as somebody from a region, it all becomes strategic to us. If I know what the game is, then as Yvonne said, we strategize to make the most of the points we can get within the framework. And the TAC believed that at that time, that 5 in the medium large was a good balance for across regions. And there was a lot of arguments.
Right, yeah, yes.
We received one comment from Maria Lara stating, has ATP considered advancing a percentage of funds for DAC for medium to large projects?
sure I understand.
I'm not really sure either.
I think whoever that is will need to come off.
Yeah, Maria, I'm going to unmute you just so you can clarify your comment. Oh. My apologies, give me 1 second. Okay, go ahead. You should be able to clarify.
Thank you. This is Maria Lara with City of Wasco. My question here is more with disadvantaged rural communities. I know sometimes it's difficult for us to go after, the bigger projects. One because we don't have the extra leverage in that bigger cities do. But even cash flow can be an issue for some of the rural communities. So I know that we're working with Clean California right now. We were a recipient of one of their round one, and they have, they advance those that get selected. And if you're at that community and obviously there's requirements, they advance some money for us, and that helps with a bigger project with cash flow and all that. And that, I guess that was my question. Have ATP consider in future rounds allowing that to those that get selected and obviously meet the requirements set by the ATP?
Okay, think I sort of understand, but maybe any of you who actually are with cities, maybe you can explain what Maria's.
I think
Asking
she's
that-
asking for advance payments because they don't have cash flow to
Oh,
pay the cost and then seek reimbursement. And that's really a state statute
Yeah,
issue.
okay. Yeah, Maria, so that's kind of beyond the purview of what we can do in the guidelines. So
Okay.
thank you.
Oh, no problem.
We got a comment from Marcella Renzi from VTA stating, I'm on the fence here. If the leveraging points go away, won't those medium project sponsors just come in with bigger grant asks? That would just put more pressure on the program.
Yeah, that's a good point, Marcella. So what she's meaning is that then if we don't have the leverage, then more agencies are going to be coming in for full funding for the program. So there'll be even less money to go around. So that is a good point.
Jackie Matho with SBCAG, and we're supportive of keeping the leveraging points the same, and so there's no changes to the next or this cycle.
Thank you, Jackie.
We got another comment from Jenny Chan stating our CTC supports keeping the leveraging points the same as last cycle. We can wait another minute, but I'm not seeing any hands raised or other comments coming in.
So we have some other people in the room from smaller cities. Anyone else want to weigh in here in the room on this? Because I would think, this would impact mostly smaller cities.
I'm trying to gain clarity before I speak on behalf of the city.
Okay, thank you. So we'll
I'll circle back if I.
okay. Because I'm not sure now. We're a little bit split on this.
I've been keeping a tally.
Okay.
So the majority is to leave it as is.
Okay. What's your count?
3 to reduce and 7 to leave as is. We got another comment from Ona Smith saying, does leveraging include in-kind as well as cash contributions?
Leverage does not include in-kind. I'm not sure what she means by cash. Funding, yeah. Yeah, so
Yeah.
that's, yeah, it does include, rural funding. Anything else? No?
Yvonne, Garcia asking, are you able to analyze what would have happened to awards in cycle 6 if points were changed? Just curious.
Yeah, we probably could, because, you know, Beverly and Alika can pretty much analyze anything. And so, but the problem with comparing with cycle 6 is we have so much more funding. And so like in the, Beverly said in the small urban and rural, the cutoff for funding was a 78, is not gonna be a 78 this time. It's gonna be much higher. So that's why this is kind of a critical question. A point here or there, it sounds small, but it really isn't, not in the ATP. So, Jonathan, back there, if the medium would have been reduced to 3 for leverage, would that have made a difference would that make a difference to your city, you think?
I believe so. I can't remember, I believe it was 2 points off, for the medium. I think we had an application of, I believe it was 4 million. And the amount that we could put forward only gave us a point or 2. You know, if it was reduced to 3 in weight, that mean everyone else ahead of us that I assume also did leveraging could have been possibly reduced. We could have barely at least hit that number. It's hard to speculate, but I imagine it would definitely help our chances.
Okay.
Carl Anderson again with MTC, reiterating our support to keep things in place. But I think it's worth also reminding folks that it's not just STIP funds that can be used as leverage, it's any other local source or any other source that the city has access to. And then I'm also curious, since you mentioned kind of management priorities, this would be kind of inconsistent with other competitive programs to not encourage folks to include funding on their competitive applications. Is that right? With LPP, the SEC, all the other CTC competitive programs, there's either a match or a leverage component to those applications. Is that right?
Yes. So you're talking about if we didn't have any points at all, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if we didn't have any points at all, if we reduced it, it would be kind of inconsistent with the other competitive.
It would be, a
programs
lot of
that
the other programs, they have a match requirement, typically in statute. I guess the difference for the ATP though is that we do get much smaller agencies applying for the ATP as opposed to solutions for congested corridors. Because those are really big projects, have to typically be implemented by a larger agency. So that is the difference, I would say. But yeah, it would be inconsistent, yes. Okay, thank you, Carl. Teresa?
I will public comment. So I'm Teresa with the CTC. So one of the reasons though that we talked about keeping it is because we also want skin in the game. And so we were very strategic, as you recall, in the way earlier conversations, in keeping it to the very large projects. So that means now that the cities, the counties, the regions, they have to prioritize these projects. It is important. Therefore, they have to look at what they do have available. So it makes sense to keep it at the large, for the larger projects and the medium projects. So for that perspective, we think it is important because then you have to prioritize your other funding. When you have that, then not that is less important, but delivery is a little bit better. So that is always been our perspective. when it comes to very large projects on the ATP. The smaller, yes, makes sense.
So Teresa, just asking you though, what about, so somewhat of a compromise would be reducing the points in the medium to 3.
Well,
It's gonna make a difference. I mean,
it does,
is.
it does. It's gonna make a difference, especially as the projects are scoring so much higher now.
Mhm.
I wouldn't advise it. But also, if that is what y'all think would be fair, to see how it plays out. But you know what happens if we make changes,
Mhm.
and this is a major change. This would be a major change. It would be kind of difficult to go back.
Yeah.
My suggestion though is for, and this is just it's something just that I thought of, is we are trying to if we keep it the same, then it will be comparable to other cycles. Therefore, we can make a pitch to the, you know, the powers above us. We need more funding. Look at what $1 billion did to the program in cycle 6. Now we're going back to a tiny little cycle. So that way we keep the cycles the same for comparison purposes from one cycle to the next. My commission is very, as you all know, our commission is really pro towards this program, very advocate and very vocal. So that's just kind of food for thought there.
Thank you.
So Mara again, and I wanted to make a comment to respond a little bit to Jonathan about the sense that if, say, the leveraging was only 3 points instead of 5, and that would have made the difference because you only missed it by 2. My answer would be, it depends, because those 2 points would have had to go into some other category. And whoever got those 2 points for leveraging might have got more points in one of those other, I mean, once we, and that's why I'm really resistant to moving it this cycle. I think we really need to take this back to the TAC for next cycle and really talk about it. But it opens a can of worms, and it does change everything. So it may have helped you, it may have hurt you. And it's really hard to tell, even if you analyze, you know, who got those points and what it is, because those points go somewhere.
Right.
And they have to be scored and.
Yeah. So one thing that Mara's pointing out that I should have mentioned is that if the points get reduced here, they'll be increased somewhere else. And so, you know, we're just kind of moving points around.
And I think it's important to understand for people, and I've been involved with ATP since cycle 1 and have scored since cycle 1. It's no matter what we do with the points in any category, there's winners and losers.
Yeah.
And there's winners and losers overall, there's winners and losers by category. And the way the points are, the way they are at this point after 6 cycles, moving into the 7th cycle, is we've come to, after a lot of discussion, a lot of arguments about this is kind of balances all the interests and needs of small regions, large regions, little cities, you know, all those kinds of things. And it's not perfect.
Thank you, Mara.
We've gotten a couple comments in the chat. So we got one comment from Rich Murphy from SlowCog stating SlowCog supports leverage points, but has some concern that small agencies' ability to match have a disadvantage, even if their project benefits outscore another agency's ability to match or leverage for full points. That said, 5% match for a small agency versus a 20% match for a larger agency could be argued as an issue of equity.
Okay.
Um,
So what is Rich? Is Rich, does he want it to be reduced, or I'm not
sure.
Or he's not sure.
Rich, could you clarify for my tallying purposes, please? And then we got a comment from Teresa McWilliam from Caltrans, kind of pointing out the same thing you did, Mara. Where do you put the points that are being proposed to be removed from the medium leveraging? And then another comment from Yvonne Garcia stating, agree 100% with Teresa and Mara. Projects have to be a priority at the local level. If changes are done, regions will adjust to those changes. The level of competitiveness will not change. Getting back to the bigger issue, the ATP program needs more funding for all of these great projects.
Thank you, Yvonne. Anything else, Alika?
Nothing else.
Anything else in the room? Yeah. Okay, so, we'll move on now. I'll talk about it with Beverly and Alika and Teresa, but I think that our general impression is that the majority of the stakeholders would like to keep it the same. But we will talk about it some more and make sure that we have a thorough discussion about it, and then we'll bring back our recommendation to the next workshop.
We got 3 additional comments,
Okay.
Really quick. One is from Maria Lara stating, agreeing with Yvonne, the ATP program needs more funding. It's time to revisit the set in stone requirements. Rich Murphy clarified stating slow cog supports moving forward. Our region will prioritize and will add match as needed. And then Martha Armis Kelly noted, yes, definitely.
Okay. All right. That was a really good discussion. Thank you, everybody, for all of your comments on that. Okay, we ready to move on? Okay, so we're gonna go back to Beverly here.
All right, so I'm gonna talk about the Justice 40 initiative, which the ATP is one of the programs that is required to comply with Justice 40 requirements from the federal government. So just as some background, you can go to the next slide. Okay, so as some background, the Justice 40 initiative was created by an executive order from the Biden-Harris administration. This is okay. Sorry, what you were doing.
My laptop's dying, so I just to make sure I have power.
Sorry, everyone.
Sorry about that.
So it was created by the Biden-Harris administration under an executive order, and it's kind of an initiative to bring more resources to disadvantaged communities impacted by climate change, pollution, environmental hazards. So it aims to have at least 40% of federal funding go to disadvantaged communities identified by the federal government. So, I'm sorry, 40% of federal funding. So the ATP has state and federal funds. So the ATP has to comply with this. So at least 40% of federal investments must benefit disadvantaged communities program-wide, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So that would include all federal funding, and there's federal funding in all 3 components. So we always try to minimize burden on applicants when we're implementing something new. So our proposal is to have applicants provide us with the census tract numbers for the projects, for the project area. So for census tracts that would be benefited by the project, and then we will use the tools to see whether that project complies with is a disadvantaged community under Justice 40, and we would basically kind of do it on the back end to make sure that we're meeting those requirements. So there's a little bit more to this. I guess I can launch into it now. So we do need to make sure that 40% of our federal funding overall meets the Justice 40 requirements. So that means the smaller written rule and MPO components as well. So our proposal is, and I'll give you a little bit more background information, is that if we basically, if we get over 40% of the investments in the statewide component, meeting Justice 40 requirements, we basically would proportionally reduce requirements in the small urban and rural components and the MPO component. So there's not so much of a bar that both the small urban and rural and the MPO component have to meet. Saying this, we don't actually think it's that much of a concern. We looked at every single application from cycle 6. Unfortunately, we couldn't pull the census tract data from the application, so we had to open up all of the successful applications individually to look at the census tracts and to see how many projects met the thresholds in each category. So you can go to the next slide, Alika. So in the statewide component, so 86% of our funds overall for the program went to projects that benefited Justice 40 communities. So in the statewide component, it was 93%. In the small urban and rural component, it was 66%. And in the Metropolitan Planning Organization component, it was 84%. And I will say every single MPO exceeded the 40% threshold by quite a lot. Not actually that concerned about it. I didn't want to give like the individual percentages for each MPO because I didn't like call anyone out. But if any MPO people are curious about this analysis, you can come talk to me or send me an email and I can show you like how much your MPO had. But basically, we're not really concerned about the MPOs. We're not really concerned about any of the components. The only thing, the reason I wanted to raise this is with the MPOs, we probably will have a target for you, but then once we get all the data from the statewide component, we'll reduce those targets. And we'll work with you to when you're putting together your staff recommendations to make sure that everything works. We'll also provide all of the MPOs with our analysis of which projects benefit Justice 40 communities. The only thing that you would really have to do on your end is a lot of MPOs do have their own call for projects. So you would have to do the work to figure out whether those projects qualify under Justice 40, because we don't receive those applications until after you look at them. So that's kind of our proposal. And if you go to the next slide, we have our kind of proposed language. This would be a completely new section in the guidelines. And I'll leave it on the screen. I don't know if you need to read it. It's basically outlining what I just said. So we would use the two tools, which are the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool and the US DOT Equitable Transportation Community Explorer. We take all the census tract data from the applications and check everyone. And again, we would do everything on the back end. So not to add very much work for the applicants on this. So sure there's questions and comments.
Good morning, I'm Colleen Bednap with D6 Caltrans. I do have a question on this about equity, right? The whole idea of federal funds. Of course, that creates more problems for these small agencies. It's like, I don't think they understand. The applications is one thing, but once you start implementing it, right? Then you got to deal with DBE, you got to deal with NEPA, all of this additional stuff. Is there any consideration of pulling those federal funds and saying, yes, they're federal, but then using as a state fund, kind of like the HSIP funds have been done? That way they don't have to deal, it's like, gosh, you're putting more work on them and they are disadvantaged.
So,
Oh, go ahead.
there you
Go
go.
ahead.
So pulling the federal funds,
Yeah, the HSIP, the way California has taken those federal funds and they've actually pulled them, and you don't have to go, and maybe there's a lot of acronyms that may not be meant, but in Caltrans for federal funds, we have to get them allocated from the CTC, and then we also have to go to FHWA and get them authorized.
right?
And so that also creates other problems for the agencies, again, like the DBE and all the additional environmental, instead of just going straight to our headquarters and saying, yes, those funds can go through as it is. It just creates
So you're talking about only having state funds on the program, so,
So we also have Desiree.
okay, yeah, but Teresa can probably respond to that.
You're talking an exchange, right, with state funds?
I'm sorry?
Exchange?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
I do not believe this program we can do that because Caltrans has to use the funds on active transportation. They're HSIP.
It'll still be active transportation, it'll just be state funds. I guess I don't think they understand what they're doing and causing so much more work
Right, but when Caltrans takes the funds,
for the small
federal funds,
agency.
the Caltrans has to use the federal funds for the intended purposes.
And it still will be.
Well, then Caltrans will have to put them in.
So what she's really requesting is that some projects would be state only, just like in, we
The
do
STEP.
in the STEP.
We do that anyway.
They
Right,
do
but I'm
that
saying
anyway.
it's just the additional work for these small agencies. They're disadvantaged and now
Yeah.
it's making them do more work.
This wouldn't be making them do more work, because every project
No.
that applies ATP since cycle 1 has to have been federally aid eligible since the get-go.
That's not what I'm saying. It's not in the application itself. It's like once the implementation comes in, these small agencies, the implementation, the additional work for the DVE and for the NEPA and everything like that. It's like it has to be allocated and then there's additional work.
So
Yeah, what I'm
that,
saying,
But
they've
that
been
choice
doing
was
that for
made
6
later.
cycles.
It's a funding issue.
Okay, I guess I'm just.
so this really doesn't have to do with Justice 40, but so if an agency has a good reason for requesting only state funds, they can request state only funding.
Okay.
And
But they're not gonna have a good reason just to say, yeah, we're understaffed, right? Cause that's.
no, they say that all the time.
That's very good.
Yeah, they always say that,
Yeah.
and we take that into consideration.
Okay, that's great. I don't want to, and again, I'm new to this whole ATP,
Yeah.
it's like, I came from a local agency and it is hard dealing with all this additional work for federal funds.
Yeah.
That's my
Agree.
point.
And just so you know, when we are considering state-only funds, we do take the
Yeah.
smaller regions. We kind of, I don't want to say we prioritize smaller regions,
Yeah,
but we do take that into consideration, how the smaller region is, the resources of the region.
Awesome.
And it makes a lot of sense, unlike, MTC, they were, this Carl is here, so we have to pick up Carl. I'm only.
I just want to add that based on our analysis of cycle 6 and the makeup of like what we've been funding, I mean, we have federal funds that we have to use anyway, and I think we'll continue to see most of the projects we're receiving just by the nature of like how the most disadvantaged communities already overlap with this federal tool. Like the projects we're funding are generally in pretty disadvantaged communities. I can't see there not being enough Justice 40 projects for us to have to be like, okay, we have to put these federal funds on this really small community project because there's just not enough.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so I'm not saying that as like something that'll be an issue. So the process for determining who gets state-only funds will stay the same. It's just there's this other layer that we'll be doing on the back end that it shouldn't affect anyone.
So far from what Beverly has looked at and researched, we don't think this is gonna be an issue at all. It's just something we do have to meet, so.
Good morning, Paul Sedano at the city of McFarland. Am I supposed to say we're understaffed? Is that? In terms of the two tools that you're proposing, they have, and we're familiar with both of those for other, in other programs that we're doing. There in the DOT one, there are some categories they break down even further. So, if you look at it just from a disadvantaged communities, both tools in my community, they'll overlap and we will meet that. If you look at the DOT one, they have 4 additional categories where they break them down and our ranges kind of go back and forth. So I'm kind of curious in terms of, are you using the overall, disadvantage screening, or are you going to be looking at those more detailed categories?
So for the purposes of this, we'll be looking at the overall scores. again, we'll be doing that on the back end, and it's not really anything that people will actually see. So, I think just for like the ease of doing this check, I've done a pretty deep dive into both tools, and for the DOT tool, there's an overall index score. So we'll probably just use, it's really funny. They say on their website that it's not a binary tool that determines whether something is disadvantaged or not, but when you download like their spreadsheet that says binary indicator for disadvantaged community. It just like made me laugh because I was like, well, you guys have it right there. So for this purpose, we probably will just use that. But again, this will just be kind of the back end where we're like checking everything.
Well, that would be the preference, it would be to make sure that it's that overall category. 'Cause I think that's the most reflective way of demonstrating disadvantaged communities.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nicole Say, City Madera. I just want to circle back real quick to leveraging
Okay.
funds. Just the city of Madera does support reducing the points for leveraging funds.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Desiree, I know you had your hand up for a while. Did you still want to make a comment? Okay, go ahead.
Hi, sure. Yeah, everything that you guys said before about the federal funds is correct. We do carefully select those projects that get the federal funds. Normally, it's projects that are larger. So that, and we understand, at headquarters, that the federal requirements can put hardships on, the smaller projects or the smaller agencies. So we are very careful to not do that for the most part. But there when TAP funds come in, transportation alternatives funds, a lot of the funds are sub-allocated to certain regions. So those actual regions have to get federal funds. And if we don't put federal funds on projects, then it looks as though we don't need the funds. So we want to be really careful about not putting federal funds on projects, because we don't want FHWA to say, oh, well, you don't need those funds, and there's a rescission and then they end up taking them back. So I just want to put that out there.
Thanks, Desiree.
So, and just so everyone knows, Desiree is with Caltrans headquarters. She's one of the program managers for the ATP for Caltrans.
We also have Claire with her hand raised. Claire, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Claire Galoglu with the City of Santa Cruz. I think here with the way that the guidelines are already set up and the points that the majority of projects, the heavy majority of projects are already utilizing to get disadvantaged community points, this is going to become something that we might talk about, but we're really not going to think about all that much when we actually do our applications, because we all already are thinking about equity and disadvantaged communities because the guidelines have made that front of mind for so many of us. So I think it might be one more thing that is part of the program, but I don't think it's actually going to have that big of an impact on us.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. That's kind of our goal. I mean, everyone already has to do the disadvantaged communities question where you're kind of addressing that equity piece. And so I also want to make sure people don't think that we're trying to like diminish the importance of this by like just doing it on the back end, because we fully support this initiative. We're excited about it. I really liked looking at the tools because they have some really cool data in them that we don't necessarily capture in some of the state tools we have that I think applicants could actually use in their applications. We basically kind of just want to, because applicants already have to discuss disadvantaged communities, we really wanted to minimize the burden on them on this piece, just because we're already basically, I mean, in the statewide component for the last few cycles, we're already funding 100% of projects in disadvantaged communities. So yeah, thanks, Claire.
We received quite a few comments in the chat. So David Ruperta noted federal law allows the state to use the STBG set aside funds, which used to be transportation alternatives, that flow into the ATP for other purposes. A swap like HSIP could work, but would politically look bad. Mike Woodman noted maybe could move to ADA shop. Sheila noted that she agreed with Colleen's comment. Joelle Campos noted, can staff just make a priority to place federal funds on larger jurisdictions that can potentially absorb the additional federal requirements? Maria Lara noted, I also agree with Colleen's comment, reporting and additional requirements doesn't help disadvantaged communities. And then David Raperta followed up and provided a link, the guidance from FHWA on transferring transportation alternatives funding to other federal programs.
Alika, so this whole thing about transferring the funds, I'm not really sure how we got to this place, but I don't know anything about that. And if we were gonna consider that, that would be involve Caltrans, and I don't even know. I mean, Teresa, that's not something that, yeah, okay. So we'll move on from that. And like Desiree said, they do look very closely at where they're putting those federal funds. And, you know, they're gonna put them where a large project or a project that's gonna be federalized anyway. So so we really try hard on that, making sure the state funds are going where they should go. So and then, which I guess they're related, but this is the Justice 40, and the way we're trying to set this up should not be an added burden on anyone.
Yeah, other than knowing which census tracts their project covers, which you should probably already know that for the disadvantaged communities question anyway. But other than that, they basically won't have to do anything, and there won't really be any like consequences for anyone.
Carl Anderson again with Metropolitan Transportation Commission. So thank you again for not, creating an additional layer of burden for applicants. Very appreciative of that. My question might be way too in the weeds. It might just be, and hopefully Desiree, if you're listening, I'll help clarify things. So I understand this is going to be a programming exercise really for you and Lori and Alika. Will you prioritize completing the 40% threshold in the statewide program and therefore not having to try and figure that out in all the subcomponents in the MPO and the small urban and rural? And then Desiree, if you're listening, I also heard you say that the TAP funds must be sub-allocated to regions. Is that a requirement? And if so, then does the 40% have to be met in each of the sub-programs, or can we just try and get it done in the statewide piece?
So I don't think we can get it completely done in the statewide component. If you look at the amount, of federal funding that we have in the statewide component, and then basically, even if we got 100% of that, it still wouldn't equal the 40% total overall for the whole program. So we will have to get some in the other components.
What's the makeup of the ATP program now, like in terms of the split federal and state? Is it like 60 state, 40 fed?
It's about that now.
Yeah, I have it all broken down.
So the state pot would be 250, and then we have to.
So
no, it's okay.
I'll do math on the back end, and then.
Yeah, I've already done some math that I can share with you, Carl, but so I think we can take care of a lot of it in the statewide component, but I don't think we can take care of all of it.
So what did you mean by prioritize?
So like, if you guys would prioritize taking care of the 40% threshold for the whole program in just the statewide component and programming those just as 40 projects in the statewide component. That way we wouldn't have to do kind of this programming exercise multiple times for small urban rural and then the 10 MPO components.
So I don't think we'll really have to.
So, just real quickly, I think, because this is the first time we're doing it.
Yeah.
I think we will try and see
Yeah.
how the statewide looks. And if we're short, we're gonna have to take it from somewhere. But I think it's a little bit, we need to figure figure it out because it will be the first time to do it, right?
Yeah, but the reason that I asked you about prioritize is I want to clarify, and I don't think you were saying this, but I want to make sure that other people don't think this, that we're not gonna bring up lower scoring projects.
Oh, no.
Okay, just want to make sure that that's not what we mean by.
No, I mean, I'm taking a look at the top, performing projects in the statewide program and trying to figure out like, okay, can we meet that 40% threshold for the program as a whole and take care of that requirement
Right.
just in the statewide component?
So, and that's the other thing that you said is, do we have to do 40% in each of the components? Which I don't think so.
I think it's
Probably.
40% of the total.
Of
So
the-
it's 40% of the total. So
That was
I
my assumption, but
Okay.
sorry to cut you off, Ruthie. That was my assumption, but Desiree's comment about sub-allocation of TAP
Yeah.
funds is what made me concerned.
Okay,
yeah, so it's 40% of the total, but if you look at our fund estimate, there are funds, federal funds in every single component. And so
mhm.
what we're saying in these guidelines is that, like, we don't really know how it's going to like play out in the statewide component. I personally think we can cover most of it in the statewide component, and then we won't really have to worry about it in the other components, but we just don't know. So we will have to have like, we'll still have to have it in our guidelines that 40% overall, and that includes like funds in all components, but that's why we're saying like we would reduce it proportionally in the other components if we can exceed that in the statewide component.
Okay, so then for the purposes of today's discussion, is it worth revising that first sentence in the second paragraph to just say at least 40% of the federal funds programmed in the ATP?
Yeah, we could do that. I think I wrote it like that because I really wanted to make it clear that we had to talk about all three components.
Sure.
But we can do that. I think that's a change, and then keep that last paragraph there.
Because yeah, the very last sentence takes care of my concern. I'm just curious about what your approach was going to be as you were programming things.
We don't know yet.
So
Because we're not there, and then
honestly,
I'm just being way too intense on this.
my hope is that we can also make it very little work on the programming and for the MPOs, because honestly, working with all of you on doing your programming, it's difficult it's a long process for us, and it's a long process for you. Like, we already have a lot that we have to do when we're working with you guys on this. So we want to make it as simple as possible. So we're really hoping that we can minimize the burden on the MPOs as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I think we're just gonna, so we have the suggestion on making the change that Carl suggested to the language.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, this is pretty much what we're gonna put in the guidelines. Unless any other comments, let's see.
A lot of comments about
The transferring, yeah, so nothing relevant to this.
Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. Anyone has any lingering comments, you can always email us about this, or if any MPOs have any questions, or if you want like my breakout of how much you funded in cycle 6. And for SCAG, I also did it by county. Just let me know. Okay, so we can move on to the next topic. But I think we should take like a 5-minute break for everyone in the room. So we will come back in 43 minutes. Okay, sorry, I guess I'm reading. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we wanted to talk about the disadvantaged community qualifier data years. So these are basically the data sets that you have to use to when you're putting in your disadvantaged community information to qualify as a disadvantaged community. So next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to talk about these 4 tools, and then we have 2 other tools that we're going to talk about in a bit, but just to clarify, these are 4 possible ways of qualifying as a disadvantaged community, so median household income, National School Lunch Program, and before anyone asks, I will explain why that's still on the list, the CalEnviro screen or Healthy Places Index. However, we have a couple other ways, so projects submitted by tribes and projects that are on tribal land automatically receive full disadvantaged community points. So we don't need to discuss that today, but just so everyone knows that's available. There's also an other category. Applicants can use kind of other data sources or subparts of these tools to qualify as disadvantaged communities. And there's also a regional qualification. So using like regional definitions, they can also qualify as a disadvantaged community. So these are the 4 that we're going to talk about right now. So everyone knows which data sets they should use. So for median household income, so basically a community can qualify as disadvantaged if they have less than if their median household income of a census tract is less than 80% of the statewide median. And so in alignment with previous cycles, we will be using the 2018 to 2022 American Community Survey data. And this will be released in December 2023. And again, this is in alignment with everything prior to cycle 6. Cycle 6 was a bit wonky because the census data was delayed due to COVID and some other problems that they had counting. So we used an earlier year, but everything appears to be on schedule for the 2018 to 2022 American Community Survey. So we will be using that, which again will be released in December. The National School Lunch Program. So as most people know, California does provide free school lunches to all children now. But we will still be using this because the state is still required to collect this data as a measure of student poverty, and it's still publicly available data. So we will still be using this as a qualifier. So we'll be using the 2022-23 school year. And so this will be the most recently available data as of the call for projects. The current school year data won't be released until after the project call for projects goes out. I think it'll be released in like May of next year. So we'll use 2022 to 2023. CalEnviro screen, we'll use CalEnviro screen 4.0, which is the current version, and it's currently available online. And for Healthy Places Index, we'll be using Healthy Places Index 3.0, which again is currently available online. I wanted to highlight these 2 just to for people listening who might be applying with projects that they previously submitted, that if you submitted something like prior to cycle 6 that you want to resubmit, so if you submitted something in cycle 5 now that you want to resubmit for cycle 7, make sure you update this because those cycles used previous versions. We used before cycle 5 or before cycle 6, we used CalEnviro screen 3.0 and Healthy Places Index 2.0. So that's what we plan on using, but we're happy to take any questions or comments on these.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat or hands raised online. Cool. Oh, we actually have one hand raised. Diego, go ahead. Diego, you'll just have to unmute yourself and you'll be able to make your comment.
There we go. Apologies. Diego Corvera, civil engineer with the city of Visalia. I had a question related to the National School Lunch Program. I thought I'd read at prior cycles that the applications, when we're using the school lunch program, they're essentially projects that would be exclusive to Safe Routes to School. Am I mistaken in that? Might there be a combination in using, say, the Cal Enviro screen with the school lunch? If you're trying to Safe Routes to School / community connectivity project, but the school is more disadvantaged than maybe the census tract is there a means to combine kind of those criteria?
Okay, that's a good question, Diego. So I think there's a couple of questions in there. You have to pick one tool. You can't combine tools. So we always suggest that you go through and you pick the tool that's best, like whatever is best for you. Like whatever like meets your community's needs. You can't combine them. However, there's no requirement. You can use the National School Lunch Program on any project. It doesn't have to be a Safe Routes to School project. If you have a Safe Routes to School project, you don't have to use the National School Lunch Program. You can choose whatever tool works for you. The one caveat is, so if it's not a Safe Routes to School project and you're using National School Lunch Program to qualify, you do need to discuss how the project benefits the schools that you're listing in there. So just make sure you do that, because it looks, well, it's a requirement. It also looks really weird if you're saying it'll benefit all these schools, but you don't actually talk about them at all in the application, and your application wouldn't score very well. But yeah, you can essentially, for any project, you can use whatever tool works best for you, but you can only pick one.
Understood. Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other hands raised or comments online.
Okay. We can move on. So we have a good set of tools that we use to qualify disadvantaged communities, but we did have some requests from stakeholders to add the new federal tools as qualifiers. We are open to that idea. We don't generally like to add new tools because we already have a really good set, but because it's kind of this new federal requirement, we're open to the idea. So again, there are these two new federal tools when implementing Justice 40. There's the US DOT Equitable Transportation Community Explorer and the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool. So there's a few issues with these, but for the US DOT Equitable Transportation Community Explorer, our proposal is to allow census tract identified as the most disadvantaged 25% in the state according to the state results. So there's state results and national results. So according to the state results, so they're basically being compared to every other census tract in the state, like Cal Enviro Screen or like Healthy Places Index, and then it's kind of giving them a score. So the top 25% in that would be qualified for a disadvantaged community. Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool is a little bit trickier because basically if you qualify as a disadvantaged community under any of these different topics, so climate change, energy, health, housing, legacy pollution, transportation, water and wastewater, and workforce development. There's also tribal and neighboring disadvantaged tracts. So if you qualify as disadvantaged under any of those categories, you are a disadvantaged community. There's not really a scale. So for both of these, we would work out the actual scoring when we do the scoring rubrics. But basically, if you qualify as disadvantaged under that, you would be considered a disadvantaged tract. So the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool, I will say, we did an analysis of like how many census tracts qualify statewide for each tool. And it broadens it a little bit, so there's probably, on average, probably like, say like 600 more census tracts than like on average than would qualify under other tools.
Out of how many census
Sorry?
Out of how many census tracts to put 600 in scale?
Oh my gosh. I think it's like 6,000, some 6 or 8,000. Sorry, I can actually tell you.
So a nominal.
Give me 1 second.
So while she's doing that, what Beverly mentioned about the scaling is that the issue that we'll have is with the severity scoring when we do the scoring, because right now we can use the other tools that we have. We've come up with a severity scale. So the more severely disadvantaged you are, the more points you get. So we have to figure out a scale for these, which is going to be kind of a challenge.
I've already figured out a proposal, but we don't have to go over it today. We can go over that during when we do our scoring rubrics. Yeah, but okay, so there are 8,057 census tracts in California. And so on average, I would say for each tool about a little bit more than 2,000 census tracts qualify. For the National School Lunch Program, I didn't know how to even start to do that analysis, so I am excluding them. But and so for the climate and economic justice screening tool, it's a little bit higher.
So do you mean in addition to what qualifies now, or are you just saying that that's how many
not in addition to what qualifies
okay.
now. I'm just saying, like, just looking on average for each tool, how many census tracts qualify. For them, for this tool, it's a little bit more. So it does kind of, if you just look at it like that, it kind of broadens it a little bit.
So we have one hand raised if you're ready for comments. Sure. Okay, Mike, go ahead.
Hi, this is Mike with the Nevada County Transportation Commission. I think maybe I was the one that brought this up originally. And my thought was more in the lines in the guidelines and the scoring criteria where you have, the B, identification of disadvantaged community. Just adding a couple of the categories to that list, kind of based on those tools, like areas of persistent poverty, historically disadvantaged, and not necessarily in the next section where we get into weighting the level of, Cal Enviro screen, median housing, free reduced lunches, just having it as a way of leaving that the same, but just expanding the category for defining the disadvantaged community areas.
So, Mike, I think I understand what you're saying, but we have a new definition of a disadvantaged community. We have to have some way of scoring it, unless you're just suggesting that we add these to the other category.
That's what he's saying,
Which
but I'm not sure.
It's fine. I mean,
yeah, not the other category. It's basically, you have the map of the project boundaries, access to destinations, then you have identification of the disadvantaged communities, whether it falls within the area of persistent poverty or historically disadvantaged. Because I don't think you can really weight those well. And, it's more just making sure those areas are covered. And I think that would help in also identifying if you're, capturing areas that meet the Justice 40 definition. But I don't think you necessarily need to include them in the weighting in the next section.
but how would you get scored then? So if that's the thing that you choose if you decide,
The only scoring it would affect is just the applicant's ability to demonstrate the project's located within a DAC, where you get 2 points if the project's fully located within a DAC. 1 point.
Yeah,
Project is,
but wouldn't they want severity points too? Like, if we don't have a way of scoring that, then they would be missing out on 4 points.
Yeah.
Potentially.
yeah, potentially if there's a way based on those tools to come up with a meaningful weighting. And I'm not sure there is.
So it sounds like Beverly, you've already,
Yeah, I've already come up with
Yeah.
basically, so I've already have a proposal for how we can weight them, which we were gonna bring up during a scoring rubric workshop. I mean, we can talk about it earlier. I don't know if we want to talk about it today because I don't have the tables ready that I put together.
Yeah, no, we can talk about it later. And the thought was that just including those, extra categories under the two tools may actually, in some areas, cover additional disadvantaged communities that aren't captured now under the current criteria, but wanted to try to do it in a way that wasn't completely reinventing the scoring criteria. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I understand your intent, but if we add any type of qualifier, we have to have a way of scoring it. Which, I mean, we're happy to put together a proposal and like talk to the group about it and get feedback on it.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
did you have you sure?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you sure?
Next, we have Diego. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think to piggyback on that point regarding the DAX, I mean, something we've seen in our jurisdiction is we have a project that we submitted twice that's really connecting an exceptionally disadvantaged community kind of on the outskirts of our jurisdiction to the downtown and other employment areas, but the project itself crosses non-disadvantaged or at least not as severely disadvantaged tracks, which really dilutes the project's benefit. So I don't know if there is a means or a way to kind of consider that. I understand this component is kind of the more quantitative scoring, right? But I mean, using maybe more qualitative aspects to evaluate that kind of connection and or overlap might be helpful. I mean, this might be kind of an outlier in terms of its scenario, but that's something we were seeing that makes it hard for this particular project. So
Yeah, Diego, I mean, we understand that. That's why there is a qualitative portion of the application where you can really talk about those benefits. So the application, in case anyone is unfamiliar, is broken down. There's like 3 different sections where you're scored on disadvantaged communities. So you're scored on severity. And so severity takes into account every single census tract that touches your project or that you're benefiting. And we use, for the tools, we use like weighted averages. So it takes into account the population of each census tract to come up with that severity score. It's pretty quantitative, obviously. Then we have the location. So if all of the census tracts that you list are disadvantaged, you get the full location points. If only some of them are, you get you get 2 location points for if it's all of them are disadvantaged, 1 if only some of them are disadvantaged, and then 0 if you are benefiting a disadvantaged community, but that community isn't actually connected to the project, but you're able to prove that you are benefiting them through the narrative section, which is 4 points. So in that narrative section, you're talking about all of your census tracts and the disadvantaged ones and how they're benefiting from the project. So we kind of have a quantitative and a qualitative aspect to this question, and I don't know, I don't know, Diego, if you're like proposing that we change that or.
I guess it's one of those things with the quantitative aspect is those few points that we would lose because the other census tracts dilute that score. That's pretty much the margin that we we missed when we weren't awarded. So, I mean, and I don't know, maybe, I guess it's a hard thing to address. I understand you're trying to manage, the applications statewide. That's just a concern that we have, so.
So Diego, make sure that you schedule a site visit. If you have a
Yes.
specific
Yeah.
project, yeah, and then we
Yep.
can, yeah.
We intend to. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Diego.
We also got a written comment from Marcella stating, since many of these projects may also be applying for the federal program that use the federal measures, and she put in parentheses areas of persistent poverty, etc., it would make sponsors' lives a little easier if we could incorporate them.
That's a good point, yeah. Laura? Thank you, Marcella.
Laura Toomey and Beg, and we would support including these tools because we have to comply with Justice 40. We should have the federal tools. It doesn't make sense not to. And I think a proposal and a very detailed discussion during the rubrics to figure out how we would do the severity points for the second tool. And then we can make a final decision as to whether or not it really works for the program. But I think conceptually we should.
Yeah, maybe it would be, I don't know, Lori, now that I'm like having this discussion, maybe it would be best to have that discussion before the rubrics discussion, maybe at the next workshop, we can talk about it, just so before. Because technically the rubrics discussions will happen after the commissioners see the draft guidelines and want to make sure like all of our stakeholders are kind of on
And it
board.
is it will be a little complicated to think through because the DAC scoring is complicated.
Yeah, I think the ETC Explorer will be pretty easy because it kind of aligns with how we're already scoring.
I see
But
that.
the second one is a little bit more complicated, but I have an idea and I've already laid it out.
Okay.
So.
Thank you.
So I think that's a good suggestion, Beverly, is that we maybe talk about that sooner.
Yeah.
Probably at the next version.
Thank you, Beverly. Carl Anderson, Metropolitan Transportation Commission. Yeah, generally supportive of including these for consistency's sake in terms of other applications and meeting all the Justice 40 requirements. Very eager to see what the breakdown would be for severity. But I do have a question on the first piece. So if the USDOT has already identified it as a disadvantaged community or an equitable transportation community, then could you explain some of the rationale or thought about making that an even stricter requirement for the state program for identifying the top 25% of that pool?
So, I mean, that's a great question. We put that in there because that's kind of the standard that we hold everyone to for the other tools. So for the Cal EnviroScreen tool, that's the standard we hold everyone to. It's the top 25% most disadvantaged. And for the Healthy Places Index tool, it's the top 25 most disadvantaged. Even though in those tools, it doesn't necessarily say like, this is the cutoff for where you're disadvantaged or where you're not. So it's kind of just being consistent with the other tools that we're using in the program.
Yeah, I guess that's my question, is that those tools are a statewide analysis regardless of disadvantage. And it seems like the USDOT Equitable Transportation Community already identifies the disadvantaged community. So it's not an analysis of the whole state. Is that my understanding?
It's an analysis. So it's comparison. It's not even a word. So it's looking at it. It looks at every single census tract in the state, and then it basically has different indicators, and then it basically ranks them.
Gotcha. Okay, so I'm just unfamiliar with the tool, so I wasn't sure if it was a full statewide analysis or if it was just a publication saying, "Hey, these are the disadvantaged communities around the country."
It's a whole. It's a statewide analysis, and so again, so there's actually national results as well. So they do a comparison to every census tract in the state, and then they do a comparison to every census tract in the country. We felt that the state results were more consistent with what we're already doing in the program, like comparing other census tracts in the state. It's funny though, because the second tool is comparing everything. Well, it's not really comparing census tracts, but it's looking at things countrywide. And there's a lot of areas where California definitely would never qualify as like abandoned mines is one of the qualifiers. And I looked and there's like 0 census tracts in California with these like abandoned mines. Disadvantage. So yeah, the first one, we're trying to be as consistent as possible with what we're doing with other state tools. Mainly because it's pretty easy to do that just the way it's like laid out.
Makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Beverly.
We got a final comment from Claire Galopli from City of Santa Cruz stating that she agrees with Mara's comments. Not seeing anything else online.
So I'm hearing that stakeholders are good with us using these, and then at the next workshop, we'll talk more about the scoring.
Yeah, and I think I would like to talk to, and between these, I'd like to talk to Mike just about his comments, to try to figure that out a little bit more, to see if there's like some way we need to change our proposal a little bit to incorporate what he's saying.
Okay.
Okay. Great. Move on. We might make it through everything today. It's exciting. Okay, so this next section are a lot of what we consider minor changes to the guidelines. I don't know, hopefully other people think they're minor too, but obviously we're here to take your comments if you disagree. A lot of these are policy clarifications. Either the guidelines were unclear or the guidelines don't really reflect the exactly what our policy is. And some of them are just kind of minor language changes just to basically just to clarify things for everyone. And so we don't end up, I don't know, just with people not understanding what we're trying to say. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, state-only funds notification. So we got some comments from, so I should give everyone some background first, I'm sorry. Okay, so basically, you have to be federally eligible to apply for the ATP, but you can request state-only funds. So you have to be federally eligible unless if you have capital construction values of $1 million or more. But agencies can request state-only funds as part of the application process. Requesting state-only funds does not guarantee a state-only funding designation. And I think we already had some discussion about this during this workshop today about how Caltrans prioritizes state-only funds. Usually they're looking for smaller communities, smaller projects that really need those state-only funds because the federal process is complicated. So we have received some feedback from stakeholders that some successful agencies don't know whether they got their state-only funding designation, or they just don't know what types of funds are on their projects. And this is a process that is kind of each Caltrans district kind of gives agencies this information, but we worked with headquarters and we think it's kind of it's going out from each district, but in kind of different ways in each district. And so we're not sure if everyone's getting the information. So we basically just wanted to propose a way where everyone can just look in one place if they need to and find out what kinds of funds are on their projects. So next slide, please. So it's pretty simple. After the commission's adoption of the statewide and small urban and rural components, Caltrans will post a list on their website indicating the state-only or federal funding designation for each project. And they'll post it on their website, and then we will also link it from our website. The reason that the MPO component is not on here, but it'll get posted as well, is that the federal funding for the MPO component is indicated at the time of programming from the MPOs. The MPOs kind of get to choose what gets the federal funding. So there will be one list where everyone can just look and see what types of funds are on their project. The only thing that I have to say is that we can never tell you if you have a mix of state and federal funds, we can't tell you what you'll get for each phase. that doesn't really happen until later on. So it happens at, when you're coming in for allocation, that's when it gets assigned. So we'll know if you have state only funding or if you have a mix of state and federal or federal only. But we can't tell you by face, and you'll be able to find that on the list. So that's pretty simple, but hopefully it helps people find that information.
We have one hand raised. Alchemy, go ahead.
Hi, yes, thank you. Again, Alchemy Graham with Cacti. Just wanted to clarify, just wanted to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So with the information that's going to be indicated sharing that some of the funds are state and some are federal, is there going to be a detailed breakdown of how much of those funds are state and how much are federal, or is it just going to say, this project is state and federal funding, sort of generally?
I think it'll just be this project is state and federal funding. I don't actually think that Caltrans can give us a breakdown of that funding because they don't assign funds until assign the fund type until it's like closer to allocation.
Yeah, I
Okay.
don't know. Desiree might have to answer that, or Teresa, I don't know if you know that.
The project will be either federalized or not federalized, the whole project. So
Yeah.
it will be the project.
Desiree, did you want to add anything?
Oh, yeah, actually, Teresa just said it. Yeah, if the project has federal funds at all on it, then it's federalized. So that would be the purpose of just letting you know if the project has federal funds or not. If you want a specific breakdown, then you can reach out to your districts and they should be able to give you that information.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not seeing any other hands raised or comments online.
Okay, we can go to the next one.
Perfect.
Okay, the California Conservation Corps or CCC coordination process. So, as part of statutes, applicants are required to coordinate with the California Conservation Corps to see if they can do any of the work on their project. It's kind of like basically have to send a couple emails, and then the CCC and the local conservation corps respond and let them know if they can work on their project. So kind of in spirit of the statute, we want to make it clear that applicants must do this coordination process each time they submit an application and for every application. So last cycle, we did have some applicants use CCC coordination documents from like 2 cycles previously. And while we understand this is kind of an added layer of kind of work that you need to do, kind of spirit of this part of the statute is to get the CCC involved in the ATP and to incorporate their work into our program. And so it's hard to know if they're available to do your work or available to help with work if you reached out to them 2 cycles ago. Maybe their status has changed. So purpose of this clarification is to just make it clear that you have to do this each time you submit an application and for every application. And I'm sure you could combine it into one email for each application. But kind of separate piece of this is someone asked if we could include this as part of submittable as an automated thing. We're still looking into that, so we're not including that here, but this is the clarification. And if you don't reach out to the CCC as part of your application process, you get a 5-point deduction. Again, it's like sending an email and asking. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of language on here. This is how the guidelines currently stands, but at the bottom, that little section F. So it's kind of the new language that we would be adding to the guidelines. The applicants must consult with the Corps every ATP cycle, and for each application submitted, applicants may not use Corps consultation from previous ATP cycles or from another ATP application to satisfy this requirement. So any questions or comments about this language?
I'm not seeing anything online.
Okay. We can move on to the next one. Okay, so past performance, this is section 20 of the scoring criteria, subsection L. So an applicant's, basically the language currently says an applicant with poor past performance on an ATP project can receive up to a 10-point deduction on the final application score. We've had some questions about this in the past. First, I don't think we've ever actually done this. We haven't. This would be for like a really egregious situation. And then it would also, when we post our final scores, if an applicant does receive any deduction on this, it's part of the final score. Like you'll see it kind of like on the list of things. So this is just changing the language to include the phrase including but not limited to. So that's basically what the language changes, basically because we feel that we can't foresee every egregious situation that could happen. So we don't really want the guidelines to be that limited. Again, we've never actually had to reduce points on anyone. This is just something, if something really egregious happens, so we have that ability to reduce points. So any questions or comments on this?
I have a comment.
Okay.
I think we need to change it to points may be deducted. Because of
Yes,
the failure
I love
on
that
any
change.
past ATP project.
I love it. Thank you.
Question. A situation where egregious, what would that be? Is it like an audit finding? Or they do not deliver the project, or we still?
So
Adverse audit findings.
Oh, okay, I can see.
Yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, adverse audit.
Which doesn't happen very often. And actually, it did come up once that someone had an adverse audit findings and they submitted again, and actually they did score well, but we talked to them and they withdrew their project,
All right.
which is what happened. So this would probably involve a conversation
Oh,
too.
okay.
So.
All right, perfect. And the reason I kind of want to bring it up is because one of our commissioners is very concerned with these, that we continue giving money or awarding funding to projects, to agencies. And so, but he wants to take it a little bit further, where if it's in one program, it can impact all the other programs. We haven't gotten there yet, but just FYI.
So Teresa, you want to add that you'll be deducted points if you've ever requested a time extension?
I don't think Teresa can be considered a stakeholder.
No. Well, we have to do what she says. Yeah, thank you. So, but like I said, if this were to come up on somebody's project, we would talk to you about it. You wouldn't just see it, on something on the website. We would talk about it.
We got a couple comments. One is from Denise Sifford, noting, agree with Lori, the railroad coordination issues resulting in lapsed funds come to mind. And then we also got another comment from Sheila, noting, to clarify, does poor past performance refer to the amount of points received on an application?
No, so poor past performance is like if you received a previous award and something happened with that project, and whatever happened with that project was really due to like severe misconduct or like it would have to be something pretty severe. I mean, we understand that projects fail, like funds lapse, and there's just like the realities of life. So we're not really talking about that kind of situation here. We're talking about something that is just really bad, that was probably done like purposely, like someone lied
Or
or,
you build a different project from what you were
yes.
funded for, or something like that.
She says thank you for the clarification. I'm not seeing any other comments or hands raised online.
Okay. Okay, we can move to the next one. Okay, so combination project schedules. This is actually language that we wanted to add into the guidelines to really just remind applicants about this issue. So applicants can apply for combination infrastructure and non-infrastructure projects. So they can have an infrastructure element like a new bike path, and then and combine that with non-infrastructure programs like, you know, a safe routes to school, education program, something like that. And often, but not always, the non-infrastructure program is dependent on the completion of the infrastructure project. And what we mean by that is some portion of their program, of the non-infrastructure program, like they actually go out to the new bike path and, like, you know, do the program on that bike path. This is something we check for. Well, so an issue we've been seeing is that agencies aren't thinking about this when they are applying, but they're basically not, they'll like request programming for the non-infrastructure program before construction, even though they have to wait until after construction to actually implement the program. And then they end up needing a lot of time extensions because they run out of time and they can't meet the time release of funds because their project isn't done yet. So next slide, please. So we wanted to just add some language to clarify that if non-infrastructure component is dependent on the infrastructure project and must be implemented after its completion, this should be reflected in the project schedule and the project programming requests. The reason we wanted to add this is because we have been getting a lot of requests because agencies will figure out that their programming is off and they have to do it later, and they've been asking us if they can reprogram their non-infrastructure component to go after construction, which is something we technically cannot do under our guidelines. So this is kind of a reminder for everyone to put it in the proper year. So any questions or comments on this?
I'm not seeing anything online right now.
Okay, cool. Okay, so something near and dear to Alika's heart, ATP benefit cost tool. So we've been working with our partners at Caltrans and the ATRC and UC Davis Institute of Transportation Studies to develop this tool on expected benefits of the adopted ATP, so successful projects. And we've also worked a lot with our technical advisory committee on this. Version 1 of the tool is currently out, and it basically estimates potential mode shifts, safety benefits, VMT reductions, and emissions reductions. And so we're working on, Caltrans is working on the contract for phase 2 of this, which will actually add the monetary benefits to it. Right now, it's just looking at, you know, the actual benefits you get from it. But basically, from our perspective, we're using this to develop kind of a roll-up of program benefits. So we program all the projects, we get the data from our awardees, and then Alika and our student intern, Peter, are working on a report that'll roll everything up. So we're actually already implementing this in cycle 6. However, it's not currently in the guidelines for cycle 6, but it's not currently in the guidelines. So this is just kind of formalizing it and putting it in the guidelines for cycle 7 and beyond. Get the next slide.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. I'm expecting you to read my mind. Okay.
Very sorry.
Okay, so this would be a new subsection of the guidelines. Basically describing what the tool is and what successful applicants need to do. So it's probably the biggest piece of this that people want to hear. And any successful applicants from cycle 6 already had to go through this. So successful applicants, including those with MPO selected projects, must submit the relevant data to Commission and Caltrans staff by the deadline established by Commission staff, which will be within 6 months of programming. And so all of the data, actually, do you want to talk about what you require? It's basically already all in the application.
Yeah, so a lot of the information that we are requesting is information that's provided in Part A4 of the application. However, because this is phase 1 of the tool, a lot of the terminology that was used in the tool does not align with Part A4. And so that's part of the reason why we asked more comprehensive information from the awardees to provide to us. So as part of phase 2 of this tool, we will be aligning the terminologies just to make it easier. And so that information essentially is what types of improvements are you proposing? Are they pedestrian focused, bicycle focused, or both? And you can also provide details on your non-infrastructure programs as well. So that's the type of information that we're currently asking for. This may shift a little bit going into cycle 7, depending on how the ETPBC tool is updated in phase 2.
Thanks, Alika. Yeah. Okay, so any questions or comments on kind of what we're requiring awardees to do for the BC tool?
We have a couple hands raised. Claire, go ahead.
Hi, it's Claire Glogly of the City of Santa Cruz. And I might have a niche issue, and it's one when we were doing our baseline agreement for a Cycle 6 grant that came up. We had a project that we had identified intersection improvements as part of the overall project, but we hadn't yet scoped in the design phase if they're going to be a roundabout, pedestrian medians, or other features. And we had described that in our narrative. So when it came time to submit the specific program elements in our baseline agreement, we didn't have that level of detail yet. I don't know if we have a way that we want to handle that when we're still not to final design in some of these projects, but it might be something that comes up. That's all.
So Claire, thank you for that comment. I know that's something you and I briefly talked about for your Cycle 6 project. I think if there are agencies that are in that situation moving forward, I think for right now, it might be helpful if they just bring that to our attention and we can work with the agencies on a case-by-case basis to kind of determine what type of information should be included for the BC tool purposes. I don't know if you guys want to add anything to that. But in terms of Cycle 6, I believe Claire, your project was the only one that was brought to our attention. I don't know if there are others out there. We plan to do a very comprehensive overview of all of the templates that were submitted and comparing them directly to the applications, just to ensure that the information that each awardee provided aligns with what they submitted in the application and that we're capturing the correct program benefits.
Thank you.
Okay. Next we have Diego. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I don't know if this is where I want to inquire, but will or does the application, I don't recall from the last cycles, if it evaluates the quality of the improvement. So i.e. if an agency is requesting funding for, say, Class 2 bike lanes on a specific corridor, but it's a high volume, high speed corridor, there's probably space for something more robust. Is there when evaluating these applications, are you evaluating the quality of the improvements, i.e. if they have buffer zone delineators and or elevation separation or otherwise into kind of the scoring rubric. It's kind of more technical in some ways, but I know there's also a DIB 94 that's in the works through Caltrans that is going to provide substantial guidance in this regard. And so whether this cycle or perhaps next, I mean, I personally would recommend that the quality of the improvement be part of the scoring for this funding.
Diego, that's a good question. It's so it doesn't really apply here, but we will talk about this when we talk about the application and the scoring rubrics, because we actually have gotten a lot of questions from particularly like legislative staff on why we fund class 3 bike lanes. And sometimes there are good reasons that an agency would be proposing class 3, but we need to be able to answer that question. So I think we're going to add something to the application that the agency should explain why they're choosing that particular type of improvement. You know, that they're putting in a class 3 because there's not room for a class 2 or a class 4 or something like that. So, and then, so we are going to try to get at that a little bit through the application and the scoring.
Okay, yeah, no, that's great. I think, yeah, the DIB 94 is still in the works. It is an HDM modification that I think really provides a lot of detail. So for jurisdictions that may or may not be familiar, that would be pretty much a document that could be referenced, I think, to substantiate.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Diego.
Yeah, I was just gonna add that it is already evaluated. I mean, through the question, the application is very qualitative. So applicants are talking about like why what they're choosing is the best fit for safety needs and for the needs of the community. But I think one thing we want to do is make it a little bit more explicit in the application that they should be discussing that, because for some applicants that's kind of a missing piece. Like they were proposing a class 3, but they don't really explain why they couldn't do something else. So we want to make it a little bit easier for them to like think about that question and propose the best project possible.
Yeah, and usually they know why they're proposing a class 3, but the us and Caltrans and the evaluators, we don't always know. So we want to make sure that they are being very explicit about it. Did we have anything else on this, Alika?
I don't think so.
On any other questions?
Oh,
Because I was just going to say something on
no, not on this.
on the benefits tool. So when Alika, when we ask for the information that's needed for the benefits tool, it really is not to create more work for the agencies. We need to do this because the program desperately needs more funding. And what's going to help us to get more funding is to be able to show the benefits, which we know what they are. You all know what great benefits these projects provide for your communities, but we need something to give to the people that could make it happen for us to get more funds to show them that. So, and that's why Alika and Peter are working through this and, you know, doing a lot of the work so the applicants don't have to do it. So we can provide some really good data on benefits. It's really going to help everybody in the long run.
Yeah, and I just want to add, especially because we got those augmented funds in cycle 6, it's going to be really important for us to showcase the added benefit because of that funding. So that's why this cycle we decided not only to utilize the ATP BC tool, but also continue to use the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Benefits Calculator tool, because that's what we use to quantify those benefits in cycle 5. So for the 2021 program. So utilizing that tool again will allow us to do a side-by-side comparison and show the significant impact that these projects can make with additional funding available.
Yeah, and you're saying because we did it for both 5 and 6, we can show because we had so much more funding in
Correct.
6 that, yeah.
Yes.
That's a good point.
I'm not seeing any other hands raised on this.
Okay, we can move on to the next one. Okay, so this is another, this is a tool where we're already collecting information from our awardees. And I did not put the correct information on the slide. Whoops. Okay, so this is, ignore the slide.
My bad, I should have checked that.
It's all good, because all of the information is actually on the next slide.
Should I go to the next slide?
Yeah. Okay, so we also use the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Benefits Calculator to look at benefits for the program. And so this is a tool that was developed for the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program, which I think is a CARB and SGC program. And it measures things like VNT reductions, air pollution reductions, and greenhouse gas reductions. So when Alika sent out her template for the ATP cost benefit tool, she, excuse me, included a template for this as well. The applicants basically have to plug in their information. And our change for this is just making it a little bit more specific about when things are due. We just stayed by the deadline established by commission staff, which will be within 6 months of programming. I think previously it just said within 6 months of programming. So we're just adding a little bit of clarification here.
Not seeing anything online.
Okay. All right, so this next edit is in the uncommitted funds section. So this is just to clarify commission policy. So last cycle, some language was added to the guidelines, and kind of the intent of this section kind of got a little jumbled because language was added. So we're basically adding this back in to make it really clear. There are only 2 instances when uncommitted funds can be on a project that's funded in the ATP. One is at the funding cutoff for the MPO component in each MPO. And also in instances where you're applying for a large infrastructure project, but for pre-construction phases only, so you're not applying for construction. So for every other infrastructure project size, you have to apply for construction, but for large infrastructure, you do not have to apply for construction. And so we're adding this language in to be clear that when you are requesting pre-construction phases only, you are, for a large project, you are allowed to have uncommitted funds on a project. Hopefully that makes sense. The way it was written before sounded like any large infrastructure project could have uncommitted funds on it. That is not the commission's policy. So we just want to make it really clear that it's only projects that are applying for pre-construction phases only. Any questions or comments?
Nothing online.
Letting cut off. You're just adding that in the section.
Yeah, so nothing is changing about the MPO section, just the bold underline is what's changing. And that was already our policy, but to be honest, it was probably me who messed up last cycle and jumbled up the language to make it unclear. Okay, well, no questions or comments on that. So those are all the topics that we wanted to go over today. And I think we ended in really good time because we have like 13 minutes left for any action items and other wrap up. So I'll hand it over to Alika.
Okay, so I'll go over the action items and then we can open up if we have time to any other questions. And I know Diana, you had an earlier question, so we can circle back and address that. As I'm going through the action items, if there's something that I missed, please let me know and I'll make sure to include this before the final version of this gets posted on our website. So the first action item I have is to discuss the leveraging internally and bring a final decision to the stakeholder group at the next workshop. The second is to make a minor revision to the Justice 40 language to state at least 40% of federal funds programmed in ATP versus specifying all three components. The third is to talk about new federal tools at the guidelines workshop instead of at the scoring rubrics workshop. And internally, we will also circle back with Mike Woodman to get clarification on his comments. Number 4 is to make a minor revision to the past performance language, updating it to points may be deducted for past performance instead of will be deducted. And the final action item I've noted is to discuss at the application and scoring rubric workshops, the evaluation of proposed improvements and recognize best solutions. So I'll open it up if there was anything that I missed, feel free to chime in now. Okay, so looks like I captured everything correctly. If anyone thinks of anything after this workshop, just please send me an email and I'll make sure to update that. We did receive one additional comment, and this is from Sheila from TCAG noting this is a super technical detail, but when using the benefit cost tool, I included a pedestrian bridge as part of the class 1 trail. Technically probably isn't an issue, but just wanted to bring this to our attention. So thank you, Sheila. I will actually be contacting you regarding that. And we'll get that information updated for the round 6 BC tool information. Thank you. Did you guys have anything that you wanted to add?
No, I'll do a closing, but.
Okay. I wanted to circle back to Diana because I know
Oh, that's right.
Diana, you had a general ATP application question. So I've unmuted you. You should be able to speak now. Diana, if you're speaking, we're unfortunately not able to hear you. I'm showing that you're muted on your end. Diana, if it's easier, you can also submit your question in the chat and I can read it on your behalf.
You can send us an email. later.
Yeah, or you can send, oh, okay, she said no question at this time, thank you, okay. All right, I'm not seeing any other public comments.
You got anything?
No, just happily got
Yeah.
done.
So I want to thank Madera County Transportation Commission again for hosting us today because this room worked out actually quite well today. So yeah, we're very happy to have our workshop here. And thank you all for coming in person. It really does help to have real people to talk to on these things and to have people in the room give comments. So we really, really appreciate that. And thank you again for another good workshop. We worked through a lot of things and we really appreciate it. And the next workshop is on Halloween.
On Halloween.
31st. So, and that one is all virtual, unfortunately, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But don't be afraid to dress up.
Yeah. Yeah. Dress up and, we'll put you on camera.
Yeah.
We'll have I almost said we should have a costume contest, but
We may have
that's
to
probably a bad idea.
schedule an additional workshop.
But we
about that.
welcome photos of costumes. We might be able to do a poll or something at the workshop, so, yeah.
That'd be fun.
Okay, anything else? Anything from you, Teresa? Thank you. Bye.